Als dem letzten Redner möchte ich jetzt zum Lesetisch Herrn Jakub Izdný einladen. Der ist ein Mitglied des Instituts für tschechische Geschichte der Philosophischen Fakultät der Karls-Universität zu Prag, Abteilung der älteren Geschichte. Er ist orientiert an die Geschichte des Mitteleuropas im 9. bis 11. Jahrhundert, auf die Hagiography, Heiligengeschichte, Christianisierung und so weiter. Und für heute, ich entschuldige mich, dass ich so schnell Sie einführe, aber wir sind in Zeitenge. Mit dem Thema Economical Aspects of Christianization in the Hagiography of St. Ludmila. Bitte.
Vielen Dank, thank you. Well, I'm going to speak about money. That's definitely something that it's not usually connected with hagiography, with the history of saints. But if we look more properly in the texts of legends, we find plenty of economical motives we could discuss about. First of all, speaking in general, we have to say that, as it was mentioned, all of the institutions were from one side sacral, spiritual institutions, then they were legal institutions, and then they were also economical and physical institutions. Jan Hasil pointed out that probably the sacral, the spiritual part was the first, but we could also look from the other way around, that without the material, without the economical way, the Christianity would not be spread so easily. Definitely, when the mission was coming to the non-baptized land, they had to rely on some original support of the usual home institution. That could be some sort of monastery that could provide them with some provisions, food, gold, etc. Then probably somebody else had to be found who was responsible for the provision of the mission. That was probably another reason why some sort of duke or a ruler was involved in the mission as soon as possible, because the mission really had to have some provision of some kind. And we can also say that the Christianity could be observed as a very expensive cultural phenomena, because obviously when somebody has to become a Christian, he had to do something for the religion, build churches, for example, stone buildings, usually first stone buildings in the area. Obviously, not all the churches were built of stone, but still it has to be some sort of economical investigation in this way. And also we read about the first books, we read about vineyards. That's everything connected with a certain economical aspect and a certain economical power. And actually, if we look in the hagiography, it's often pointed out that the good Christian ruler is the one who is building churches and who is giving a provision to the priests. He actually nurtures the priests as a father of the family, or mother of the family in case of Saint Ludmila. And this brings us to another question, which is connected with the property of the women, especially the duchesses, the members of the ducal or royal families, whatever we can describe this. It's obviously a complicated question, as it was already mentioned, more or less due to the lack of sources. But still, we have some ideas we could, let's say, get from the small amount of sources we have. First of all, for example, in the Great Moravian Law Code, we read quite often that there was plenty of penalties in money or in some property given directly to women, to the person of a female sex. So this means that probably even the Slavic culture counted on some sort of women's property. And connecting together, we also have plenty of information from a cultural very nearly Ottonian Empire in the 10th century, where there we read about a lot of cases where the members of the royal family had plenty of property. So maybe in this way we could sum up that it is possible that even the women could give from their own lot, from their own property, to the church purposes. For example, the almsgiving is mentioned very often. The Christian's Legend, a very important text in this way, exactly says that Ludmila offered gifts not from robberies or property of the poor, but from the property God gave her to use, which means it stresses up that Ludmila used some sort of her own money to pay for the alms, for the priests, for the churches, etc. This particular sentence is connected to the period of Ludmila's widowhood, which means the period after the death of her husband. This could be maybe somehow the source of the property Ludmila could use. We could not be actually sure if it was her own money, her family money, or it was somehow connected with the evolving organism of some sort of state. This is actually something we cannot be sure enough. But still, somehow from the sources we could read indirect points that the widow could somehow share the property of her late husband. Yes, the role of rulers is very important, obviously, in the hagiography that concerns the story of Christianization of a land. And we see that the ruler is an important figure also not from the spiritual, but also from the economical side, which means that all figures, both male and female, actually, in the legends, provide money and other goods to the churches. They are building churches, they are provisioning priests, and as I said, they use the family metaphor, so it is as the father nurtures the children, or as the mother actually cares for her children. The same role is seen in this metaphor of a relationship between ruler and the priests. And obviously we read about plenty of generous gifts which contain gold, silver, or even in the case of St. Wenceslas, the slaves as a important property that could be given to the churches. And as we can see, St. Ludmila's role in this way is painted the very same way as the male figures in the legends are. So it seems like Ludmila could really decide of her own money somehow. It is interesting that not any part of this description is connected directly to a specific sex, for example, or gender. For example, the alms that could somehow be much more densely connected with the women's lot in the Christian church are described as given by the male as well as the female members of the family. So still it seems that at least in the eyes of the creators of the texts of the hagiography, women could actually have some sort of their own property, and they could use it for the virtuous or pious deeds. Another question is connected with the quite popular scene of Ludmila's murder. In this way we read, already in the oldest hagiography Fuit in Provincia Bohemorum, that Ludmila is actually speaking with her murderers, the future murderers, that she reminds them about their common past, how she behaved to them, and that she gave them a precious object such as gold, silver, and precious vestments. Interesting third point. This is sometimes seen as a proof that Ludmila could actually be in a certain period of her life ahead of the ruler's retinue. Yeah, so instead of her husband, probably after his death, she could somehow care for the retinue of the duke. So in this way, this is considered that Ludmila was actually a head of state, let's say, the first female head of the state in Bohemia. We cannot be definitely very sure about this because we still are not sure what was the nature of the money that was Ludmila using for this, yeah, the nature of the property, the gold, silver, and the vestments. First of all, she could definitely use some sort of, let's say, state money, but we are still in the phase where we cannot easily decide what is a state property, let's say, and the family property. Probably in this period it was still the same. And the second problem is that still this could be somehow connected to the usual position of the woman in the household of the ruler, that she could actually also care for the retinue, as well as her husband. Even when he is alive, she could be the one who cares for the household, for the property, for the retinue, for the general family. Yeah. Another interesting question could be connected directly with the scene of a fight between Ludmila and her daughter-in-law Drahomira. Actually, a lot of the story is described as a fight for money, and it's really interesting if we compare the older sections of the hagiography that describe this more as a fight for power and for money, and only the newest legends describe this as a fight over religion and describe Drahomira as pagan. Interesting enough, Drahomira is actually described as caring for Ludmila's properties. Somehow she really wants to have the money of Ludmila, as she is afraid that Ludmila will take some property from her. And after the murder, it is actually described that the killers actually seized the property as a spoils. So Ludmila probably had some sort of money in the eyes of the author of the hagiography, of course. She could have by herself at the moment of her death some sort of precious property that could be seized. And also after that, Drahomira is said to usurp the properties of her mother-in-law. So there was some sort of probably other kind of property, probably some sort of land or maybe some houses that were originally devoted to the widow. So if we connect all this together, the description of the hagiography clearly gives us a picture of a woman having a connection with the money and being able to act as an owner of a precious and important property. And there is also a scene of some sort of bad mirror of the benefactor. On the other hand, when Ludmila was building the churches and giving the money to the priests, Drahomira is obviously described the very opposite way. Yeah, she's taking the spoils from the church, and she's taking the churches and the houses exactly the opposite way as Ludmila was giving out everything. On the other hand, Christian's legend also describes one particular moment that strikes our attention. According to the words of the legend, Drahomira should be actually the first woman in Bohemia who actually established a church. That's quite an interesting point. Obviously, in case of the legend, it is described that actually Drahomira made this church in order to cover up the miracles that occurred at the gravesite of Saint Ludmila. So it's not a very good way how to build a church. Yeah, she's actually covering her crime. But let's say that this has not to be the only description or the explanation of this deed. Yeah. For example, we could say that Drahomira could actually build the church as a sort of redemption of her sins. Yeah. She actually was feeling that she did something wrong, so she decided to do something for better reputation, or even maybe making up her sins, yeah, to build a church in honor of Ludmila. That's obviously another way how we can see the situation, but obviously that's something that the hagiography is not saying. And also there is a question: what sort of property, what sort of money Drahomira used to build this church? Was it her own lot? Was it the state money, let's say the family money? We cannot never be sure, because obviously that's not something that would that would somehow attract the attention of the author of the text. And last but not least, I'm speaking about the precious vestments. Obviously not from the archaeological point of way, that's probably better to leave for other colleagues, which I'm particularly looking forward. But it's interesting to see that precious vestments are actually mentioned together with gold and silver as a third most valuable object that could be given to the duke's retinue. Yeah, so when Ludmila is speaking to the members of the retinue, Tuna and Gomon, she actually tells them, I gave you a lot of gold, a lot of silver, and precious vestments. Like, this is a very important part of a person's property, the vestments. And we also read about the same kind of precious vestments when we see the description of Ludmila's funeral. Actually, we read that Ludmila's own clothes were found intact as a sign of miracle. Ludmila actually had intact, not spoiled clothes that were in the same condition as her body was intact. But on the other hand, it is precisely described that Ludmila actually was wrapped in another precious vestments during the second burial in Prague. So once again, we see that this is an important part of a revering procedure that is tightly connected with the revering the holy relics, yeah, giving some precious object, attaching it to the relics, and putting and stressing up the price that is seen not from the earthly but also from the heaven. It is interesting that in this way we see the change of Ludmila's tradition and tradition of her killing, because the older texts, and especially if we consider Legenda Christiani as an older text, Ludmila is originally killed by the rope, but only after that, during, let's say, the 11th or the 12th century, in the Russian actually the old Slavonic legend of Prolog Ludmila found in Russia, it is for the first time from our point described that she was actually killed not by the rope but her own veil. This is something that changes during the 11th or the 12th century. So connecting this all together, we must say that all these economical motives in the hagiography actually open a lot of interesting questions that could be surveyed in a separate way, and we could also describe this as a special way how to look on the period of Christianization, not as only as a spiritual, not only as a legal, not only as a cultural change, but also as a kind of economical change. Unfortunately, our sources usually don't give us a very broad picture of the economical questions. Obviously, as I mentioned in the first place, the spiritual and the economical questions tend to be rather separated, and money is a little bit worldly object, not connected with the figures of saints. But as we saw, even in the case of Saint Ludmila, there is a strong and I would say important connection that could be observed and studied. Thank you very much.
Ja, schönen Dank auch Ihnen, Herr Izdný. Sie haben uns ganz richtig daran erinnert, dass alles teuer ist und auch die Christianisierung nicht umsonst war. Ja. Ja, das sind selbstverständlich wichtige Fragen, die zum Beispiel damit verbunden sind, wovon Sie gesprochen haben, und zwar welches Ursprungs und Charakters das Eigentum eigentlich noch in Stammgesellschaft war. Ja, also etwas bleibt immer etwas offen. Bitte, haben wir irgendeine Fragen? Auch von außen?
Ja, dann würde ich mich melden, bitte.
Ja, Christian, bitte.
Ich hoffe, ihr könnt mich verstehen.
Ja.
I would like to say that I very much enjoyed the presentation, especially about the annotations about the ruler's retinue. I will later in my own paper speak a little bit about that in the side of the Russian chronicles, And because of that, I would like to speak about the druzhina and the druzhiniki, using the old Russian terms for these people. This is the existence of such a retinue or a druzhina is a very crucial element of the whole organization of the new builded states and dominations in the east of Europe. And I can say that they were very important in economic phases, because they were the people who were able to get the tributes and the other givings from the country. So I would like to say that loyalty to the leader of these retinues is one of the crucial elements of the functioning. And on the other hand, if the leader or the ruler was not able to pay the warriors, the retinue, there was a danger that loyalty would be lost. And that is the question maybe for the situation shortly before the murder of Ludmila. Possibly she lost the economic basis for paying for the retinue. What do you think about that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, this could be definitely a point of view how to look on this whole problem. Yeah, there was certainly some sort of retinue that was controlled by the ruler, and obviously it has to be a person who was able to give money and precious objects to the retinue. And once obviously Drahomira was the one who controlled the retinue, she was the one responsible for giving them money. And yes, this is something that Ludmila could remind the members of the retinue that she was actually in her former times the one giving them this money. So probably she was some sort of reminding them of the situation, but it was no more. Yeah. So this could be obviously part of the whole problem. We, as it was said, cannot observe in general, yeah, because it was mostly described in the legends. That it is described as a religious fight, but it could be also a fight for power, and as we saw, it could be a fight for money. Most of the money probably was under control of Drahomira with the rest of the retinue, but still there was some property that could be seized, as it is described by the legend. Yeah, so Ludmila probably should have at least some rest of property, some rest of precious objects, maybe even some houses that belonged more directly to her than to her daughter-in-law. But the situation was definitely already changed during the period of the rule of Ludmila's sons. So yes, I would agree.
Okay.
Dankeschön. Also noch irgendeine Frage?
George was the first, yes?
Thank you. I also enjoyed the paper very much, and thank you very much for that. Just two questions, or maybe rather remarks. First, you stress very much that this role of Ludmila as a donator, as an alms giver when she was a widow, and of course it fit very well to this image, this topos of the pious widow, holy widow. But in fact, if we look also to West European charters, it is pretty obvious that widowhood was the time when women were more or less more free than in any other period of their life to give properties to ecclesiastical institutions. So this can be, I think, explained by that. And when you mentioned the conflict related with Ludmila's property as a widow, I think it should be reminded that such a conflict about the widow's ownership of lands, of dowry, dos in the sense the lands given by husband, of course, was quite common in the period, especially in Antonian Germany. And if one believes that what is claimed by many scholars, that in fact the same lands were given to the following women coming to the family, so the same land were a part of those of the following women. This is discussed. Not all scholars agree with that. For example, Phyllis, who is a member, who is a participant of this conference, I know that she argues against that. But if you follow this opinion, I think it can easily explain why Drahomira could be involved in this conflict against Ludmila, because she would be the potential owner of the land, which were the part of dowry of Ludmila. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both remarks. Yes, first of all, the first thing I actually did when I was reading these parts of Ludmila's hagiography was comparing them with some parts of, for example, the hagiographical records of Saint Matilda of Germany, which is very close in geographical and also in a chronological way. So yes, the position is very similar. Maybe the usual picture of a holy widow is more connected with some sort of devotion, with the act of praying. Yes, but questioning the material point of view, yes, obviously almsgiving was something connected with the holy widows. And on the other hand, we see very similar pictures even in the male figures of the hagiography. So even the figures as Saint Wenceslas, for example, is giving a lot of alms and money from his properties to the poor and to the church. Concerning your second remark, definitely, this could be a problem and maybe a cause of the fight between Drahomira and Ludmila, that somehow they relied on the similar or same property. The problem could be that, for example, this is maybe more like the picture painted from the author of the legend. We cannot be very sure that already in the beginning of the 10th century, actually, the Přemyslíc state was already in the situation where a particular pieces of property was devoted exactly as a certain dos or dowry to the particular members of the family. I would say that the situation was more I would say accidental, yeah, not that much thought for. But definitely, it could be something that comes in the mind if we read about the fight between Drahomira and Ludmila. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Aber anders der Zwiespalt zwischen Ludmila und Drahomira sieht ganz irdisch aus, nicht wahr?
Ja, wirklich.
Ja, Matthias, bitte.
Let me please add that if you read Hinkmar of Reims, De Ordine Palazzi, you will find that the queen had the control over the master of the treasure, and with him together, she had to give the gifts to the retinue. It's the same structure that is written down there, but that doesn't mean that the queen was the head of the state. In the Frankish realm, you can find that as well, that the queens have to do with the treasure. I may explain something of that, what we find in Bohemia as well in the late 9th century. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing this out. Yes, that was something I was also mentioning. Unfortunately, we cannot be that sure. First of all, we read the sources as a message from, let's say, period that could be some decades younger than the actual life of Ludmila. So this could be actually a description of the life of the end of the 10th century, not the period of Saint Ludmila herself. And obviously, yes, this could be some sort of, let's say, typical picture of literary figure of ruler's wife. giving up money to the retinue and caring for the treasures as a mother of the household. Thank you very much.
Ja, geehrte Damen und Herren, die Zeit ist sehr fortgeschritten. Also ich entschuldige mich, aber wir müssen schon unsere Sitzung enden. Ich möchte an alle Vortragenden, Diskutierenden und Teilnehmer ganz herzlich viele Danke zu schicken. Und ja, vor der Pause möchte ich Herrn Izdný vielleicht für die Organisationsinformationen bitten. Ja?
Thank you very much. From my side also, thank you to all the participants, all the speakers, and all the members for the discussion. And we will see after 1 hour, I would say, about. So we start, as it is in program, in 2 o'clock in the afternoon with the afternoon section. And I'm looking forward to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Guten Appetit.